So in this video, we'll be looking at how to use physics triggers to create collectibles for our game. This could be a potion, this could be a coin, this could be almost anything. I'm defining a collectible simply as an object that your character is going to physically intersect with, and then something's going to happen. For this tutorial, I'm going to build just a simple coin collector, if you will. And the last video I talked about adding a UI element to be able to show our total. We're going to hold off on that for a bit, and that'll be in the project number 2 when we get into more UI. But we will set up the groundwork in terms of our Playmaker FSM to easily be able to display that number in our UI when we get to that part of the project. So let's go ahead and get started with this. I'm going to just create a 3D object. I'm just going to make a sphere. And this is going to become the collectible. All right, so I got my sphere here. I'm going to rename this collectible sphere. All right, now, as it is right now, by default, we have a sphere collider, and that sphere collider is going to not necessarily work the way we want it to. And so we're going to want to set that as a trigger, much like we did with the platform in the previous video. So I'm going to set it as trigger over here in the inspector. And I might even increase this radius so that when you get just kind of near the sphere, you're going to collect it. Okay. So that's the basics of it. And then we're going to add a FSM. So I go to add component, add an FSM. And I'm going to name this collectible sphere. And then press edit to open up the Playmaker window. And for right now, what we want is essentially just 2 states. We're going to have the first state here where the collectible is waiting to be collected, and a second state where we'll do something. Maybe we play a sound, maybe we start up some particle effects, maybe the object just disappears. So this first state, we need an on trigger enter, so that's going to be our trigger event. So come down to our action browser, open up our action browser, and we're going to search for trigger event. Okay. Much like we did with the platform, we want something to happen when the player enters this trigger. So we want to keep it on trigger enter, and then the collide tag is going to switch over to player. Okay. And we need to send an event. So let's create that event. Let's call it collected. All right. Add that onto our state. Collected. While we're at it with our state, let's name this state here. So I've added the transition. Now I'm in the state window. I'm going to call the state wait to be collected. Okay. And then in my trigger event, make sure we set the send event to collected. Next piece is we need to add in a new state. And I'm going to name this collected. All right. And let's connect that, that event and that transition so we come down to the state. Now, there's a lot of different things we could do here. Let's start nice and simple. Maybe we can add a few bits here. So let's just start with turning this sphere off. So what we can do in our state over here, we can drag and drop that collectible sphere from the hierarchy in. And we'll get a context menu here. I can go down to game object, and I can choose, actually let's go all the way down to game object here, and we can activate game object. What this is going to do is allow us to turn off or on this object. And in this case, we're just going to turn off the sphere. So we want the activate to be unchecked so that the object turns off when we're done. So let's see if that's working. I go in, I've collected it, it turns off. All right. Now, another piece that we need to do here, we want to be able to potentially track how many of these we've picked up. And in order to do that, we're going to need to create a global variable that's going to be able to be accessed by other Playmaker FSMs. So if we go to variables, and down at the bottom, we're going to click on the global variables button. And that's going to bring up a window that looks like this. Okay. And the variable type that we need is going to be an integer. Can't really pick up part of a sphere. So we're going to call this the new variable. Just call it spheres collected. All right. Once you've finished that, make sure that the variable is showing up here in the window. You can close this window, and then we're going to go back to states, and we want to add one to that variable. We've picked up one sphere, so we want to add one to our count. So in your action browser, we're going to look for, do add, see if we can find an add int. There we go. Double click or drag it in. And this is going to add an integer. Now we need to make sure that we're adding before we turn this game object off. Because when we turn the sphere off, we also turn off this FSM. So right now, if I ran this as is, we'd get to this activate game object state, but never get to this int add because we'd be turning the game object off. So let's make sure this int add goes to the top. And then we're going to choose our variable. Here under globals, there's our spheres collected, and we're going to add 1. Okay. Now we're not going to do much with that variable beyond just creating this global variable at this point. If we were building a UI, we would then potentially display this value and such things. So let's just make sure this works. And what we can do here, let me see. If we go to variables and open up our global variables option, I can pull this over here. And what you can see here is the value of our spheres collected. And hopefully when we collect that sphere, this 0 will turn to a 1. So let's try that again. I lost my, we'll see if we can pull that back up. So I've collected that. Let's go back to Playmaker here, open up our global variables. And there you go. Not very exciting, but it's working. Our spheres collected is now up to 1. Okay, now that we've got our collectible reacting to the player coming near it, let's get a little bit more creative here. And again, there's lots of options here, but a sound effects is pretty nice. So one option would be to go to your asset store here, and I've searched here for sound effects and coins. Of course, you can search for whatever you want. And there's plenty there that's free. Some of it you have to pay for. Another fun option is this website here, bfxr.net. And you need Flash to run this. This is a Flash program here. And what this can do is generate 8-bit sounds. Now, that may or may not be what you're going for in your game. But it can be kind of fun. So here you kind of have some presets of basic things. So here's like a pickup coin. And every time I press this, it's going to mutate the sound a little bit. So maybe you're a little bit more clever than I am and you can play with all these options here and get the sound exactly as you want. Or you can continue to hit the button until you get something that you like. And you can see this option right here, play on change. So every time I hit this button, I'm changing my sound effect, and it's playing it. Also, I can play this button, or I can push this button, and I'm playing the sound over and over again without the change. And so what we can do now is, I think somehow this has managed to be saved as jump 9, but what I can do here is export as a wave. And I'm going to export the wave, and I'm going to drop this onto my desktop here. I'm going to just call it pickup SFX for pickup sound effects. And then I'm going to go back into Unity, and I'm going to create here my project folder under assets. I'm going to create a new folder. I'll just call it SFX for sound effects. Go into that folder and right click, and we're going to import a new asset. Right. We're gonna go find this on my cluttered desktop. There we go. Pick up sound effects. And now that we've brought it in, we can preview it in Unity. All right. So maybe we want to, every time we collect a sphere, we are going to, we're going to play the sound. All right. So we need to create an audio source, and you can really get into the audio source thing. You can, there's a lot that can be done. We're going to do it really, really simple. Now, we don't want to put that audio source on a collectible sphere because we're turning that off. So we need somewhere else for this to go. And so what I'm going to do is create an empty, and I'm going to call that SFX Manager. You'll see in a lot of games, people are creating manager objects, and that's just to create or to hold scripts that are managing some aspect of the game. So I've got this sound effects manager, and we need to add an audio source to it. So we're going to add component, audio source, down here. Okay. And there's a whole lot of options here, well beyond the intent or scope of this tutorial. What we're going to do here is, well, let's start with the simplest option here. We can just drag and drop this audio clip here into our the audio clip slot. And now we don't want to play on awake. We're going to turn that off because we don't want a collection sound playing whenever we start the game. All right. So what we need to do is back in our Playmaker FSM, on this state here when we're collected, before we turn this game object off, before we turn the collectible sphere off, we want to tell this audio source to play. So if you've unselected the sound effects manager, click on that back again in your hierarchy and drag and drop this audio source into this state. All right. And we're going to go to audio, and we're going to go audio play. All right. And let's move this up to the top. We want to make sure that's getting played before the game object is turned off. And let's see how that works. There we go. Simple as that. We've got a little bit of auditory feedback. If I duplicate my sphere, let's go here to scene view. Duplicated my sphere. Now each time I run through one of these, I get a sound effect played. So let's go back and look a little bit more at this audio play here. You got a couple options here. You may want to turn the volume down. That's a reasonable thing to do. You can also use this one-shot clip. So maybe you want to substitute in a clip for a particular collectible. Rather than creating an audio source for each type of collectible, you can simply drag and drop a one-shot clip into here and get a different sound effect. So that's one way to do that. I think that'll do it for this time around. We've created a collectible. We've created a global variable to keep track of how many we've collected, and we have some auditory feedback for the player to let them know they've collected something. A lot of room for some creativity here. I'd encourage you to play around, try some different ideas. Hope that was helpful. Thanks for joining. See you next time.